years. I went up to Manchester in about 1990, 91. The first I think we heard about Noel Gallagher and Oasis was Johnny Marr's brother Ian, who was, really into his music and his bands. I remember him turning up one morning saying he'd met a ticket tout outside the Apollo, Manchester, called Noel Gallagher. He had this tape of his band, a demo tape. Him and Ian had got talking, I guess, and when Noel discovered that Ian Marr was Johnny Marr's brother, he asked Ian could he get this tape to Johnny. And then Ian came back with a story that there's the singer in the band, Noel's little brother, who seems to think he's the new John Lydon and the new John Lennon, so we all had a laugh at that. And Johnny liked it. I went over with Johnny, we met Noel, and we went to like a guitar shop in Sheffield, I think, something like that. And they just talked, and I just thought he was just some, bloke, I don't know. I didn't take him seriously at all. Then I think as Oasis developed, they needed management, and Johnny made the introduction from Noel to Marcus Russell, who was looking after Johnny as well. That was kind of the start of it, really.
Okay. When Noel started working with us, Liam always came to gigs. I'm not saying tagged on, he was invited, bring your mates, bring everybody. So Liam had been very much on the scene, but just a beautiful kid that wasn't really the Liam that we know now. It was quite quiet like that. And Liam will tell you himself, he was just taking it all in.
My name's Liam, I'm single. My name's Noel, and I'm a lead guitarist for Oasis. I come from Manchester. Started about 4 years ago. 3 years ago. About 3 years ago. When we did the first gig out at 90, I think it was 1990, in Boardwalk, when he were in it. Then he joined, started writing new songs, and that was it. And got on, and now we're here. That to me was just the day in bed. I'll take my car and drive real far. You're not concerned about the way we are. In my mind, my dreams are real. Are you concerned about the way I feel tonight? I'm a rock and roll star.
Graphic designer Brian Cannon.
I had a tiny office in a converted cotton mill in Manchester, and in the same building the Spiral Carpets had their office, and Noel was working as their roadie. We used to see each other knocking about the building, but the first conversation we had was, I say he asked me where I got my shoes from, he's convinced I asked him where he got his from, but it involved trainers. Just got chatting in a lift, and he asked me what I did, and I said I designed record sleeves. I was trying to start out to do so, and he asked me what I'd done, and I'd done a couple for the Verve back then, early ones. It was 93 this. And he said he'd seen them and he liked them, and he asked me would I design his band sleeves, who were yet to be signed, but when we get signed, not if. And then shortly after that he gave me the famous live demonstration Union Jack's roll tape, of which only 10 exist. And the last one that went for sale went for £4,000. I lost mine. He kept asking me to come and see his band, and I kept putting it off because I thought they're bound to be rubbish. But he pestered me, and in the end I saw them play at the Hop and Grape Bar in Manchester University, supporting, I think it was Liz Fair. I was there with Marcus Russell, the manager, and Johnny Marr was there, I believe, and about 3 students, and that was it. And they were just like a juggernaut coming through the wall. I could not believe it. I missed the beginning of the set. Well, I didn't even see the full set. It was just remarkable, this is before they'd ever had a record of it.
Peter Hock can recall an even earlier gig when Oasis supported his band Revenge at the Oldham Hippodrome in 1992.
It was the first time Noel had played with them. It was the first time they played under their new name. Unfortunately, I was sucking up, so I wasn't really paying attention. The highlight of the evening was when my brother filmed a cockroach crawling out of a glass with Oasis, the sport band, in the background. And he keeps telling me he still has that video. in his loft, and I keep saying, will you get it out because I need to retire? Yeah, it's one of those nice things, you know. It's like that leapfrog effect that you're supposed to have. You come out of the limelight, something's in it, and so it's all about that, so that was quite nice.
Demo cassette he gave me, I played to Richard Ashcroft, which then in turn led to Oasis getting the gig of supporting Verve as well, just then, not Verve, in '93. What a tour that was. I'd watched Verve support a lot of bigger acts, and it was very much a two different dressing room situation. But that all went out the window, heavyweights mucked in together. And in fact, for the Preston gig, they were playing the Preston a venue called The Mill. The Oasis, what's the tour? It was probably a transit van broke down, and we sort of mustered the troops, and Richard got the Verve's van to go out on the motorway and meet him. You know, there was a lot of camaraderie involved. It was great.
One evening in May 1993, Glaswegian concert promoter Paul Cardone decided to head out for a pint and watch some bands at his local venue, King Tut's Wawa Hut.
I went to see 18 Wheeler. I knew the band, and they told me that there was a support band that I should check out. But I think they actually were talking about Sister Lover was the other band on the bill.
This is the night that would go down in rock history. The night's creation boss, Alan McGee, also decided to pop into King Tut's for a pint.
I spent most of the set at the bar trying to get a drink. I do remember Liam looked so different from the time. There was this guy with a Paul Weller haircut and the tracksuit zipped right up to the neck. He just stood out and looked incredible and walking about after their set. At the end of the set, it was actually Susan McGee, Alan's sister, who told me that Alan was really excited about the band. So as I saw them walking about, I went and said hello, to what I later found out was no.
As legend has it, Alan McGee offered to sign the band on the spot, but not before phoning his PR man in London, Johnny Hopkins.
On 31st of May 1993, I was in bed in my flat in North London, and this is the days before mobile phones and everything, and my landline in the hallway rang. I'm thinking, Jesus, right, it's midnight, I'm not going to pick that up, but the phone kept ringing. I thought, oh God, someone's died or there's something, a family situation. So I got out of bed, picked up the phone, and it was Alan McGee. Johnny, I've just seen the most incredible band. They're kind of like the Beatles and the Sex Pistols, and they just look amazing, and the songs are great and all of this. That sounds amazing, Alan, but it's midnight. And then sort of like half an hour later the phone goes again, and it's Alan, and he's like, Johnny, this group are so amazing. He went again, talked about the songs, and he talked about how they threatened to trash the venue if they weren't allowed to play, and he was getting more and more excited by it, really. Again, we agreed to talk the following morning, and I went back to bed, and then half an hour later the phone went again, by which time I'm getting more intrigued as well. McGee's a really brilliant PR man, but I had a little sort of kind of element of caution in my head, because I'd heard Alan be really excited about lots of new groups that quite didn't live up to the claims and everything, but I wanted to hear the music really and see them live and all of that. In the course of these conversations, he also said that he wanted me to be their PR person, definitely up for that, But anyway, we agreed to talk again in the morning, and of course, every half an hour practically throughout the night, Alan kept calling me anyway.
Alan McGee seen us in a club in Glasgow, and it went from there. He just seen us and offered us the deal that night. We'd not had any exposure as such, but we didn't send any demos out to anyone or anything like that. It was just
met him at a gig.
Just met him at a gig, and he was the first guy from a record company we'd ever met ever. He just seemed like he's a top guy.
He just said he wanted to sign us, you know what I mean? He was like, oh right, yeah, nice one.
So we did.
Thought didn't even know who he was, and then he did. Went down, met him, had a chat with him, he was right.
Next one's called Dixie's Dinner.
Go straight.
Makeup starting to run.
Very first time I met them would have been probably within a week of McGee seeing them in Glasgow. They came down to the Creation offices, which were in a mad sort of warren of rooms in a really old kind of Victorian building in Hackney, sort of pre-gentrification Hackney. Late in the afternoon, I think they arrived. There was automatically a huge commotion. They had a presence from that very early stage.
Paul Mather was one of the first music journalists to write about the band.
Johnny Hopkins, the Creation press officer, was telling me one day about this band that Alan McGee had been raving about and ringing him throughout the night to tell him he discovered the band who were going to be the biggest band in the world. He played me a tape. It was good, but it wasn't like mind-blowing. And then he said, well, come up and see them in Manchester. So I went up July 93 to the boardwalk. They had rehearsal rooms beneath the venue. It was this tiny little room with a massive Union Jack on the back wall. We went down there and there was a bench along one wall. There were these just like scally monk lads really. And they said, right, do you want to hear some songs? And it's kind of embarrassing because you're never sure whether you're supposed to clap in between the songs or it was just kind of weird. But they just started and it was just like a hurricane. And I was just blown away. I just thought, this is extraordinary. Because I'd been writing about music for 15, 20 years. I had actually promised myself that I was going to give up possibly 2 weeks after this event, just because it didn't seem like there was anything interesting anymore. And this just changed my life.
When you work with bands, whether it's in PR or management or A&R, you kind of have a checklist really. Have they got great songs? Can they cut it live? Do they look good? Will they be good in interviews? And the whole performance in the office ticked the fact that they look good, and two, the fact that they were beyond funny, really incredibly funny, because when they came up into the press room, the three of them, Bonehead, Liam and Noel, stood in the middle of the room, almost kind of back to back in a triangle, right, which is sort of odd in itself, and they were just answering questions. They were so funny, so sharp, so intelligent. There was a real man humour there.
99% of the people here don't know anything about us apart from what they've read in the press or whatever they might have heard. But there's a lot of people here from around the world who probably think, I've never heard of these, do you know what I mean? But tonight they'll have a better picture of what we're about. Once the curtains go back and all that, it'll be, well, yeah, I've seen them now. And he can go back and tell his mates in Italy or whatever, or like around the world, and then it's like a saying, it's like a global thing.
Torsten Luth worked for Sony International as the band's product manager in the early days. But he remembers the first time Alan McGee and Dick Green from Creation visited him in Germany.
They talked about this band. They played us the first batch of songs, and then we were all going. It was just me then, flew to London and saw them at Water Rats, which I think was their first ever London show. We had a good time. We couldn't really see that much. I guess it was one of those shows where everybody says they were there. Whoever was there couldn't really see anything because the place was so fucking crowded. It was basically impossible to see anything apart from if you were in the first row. Great fun.
Glaswegian promoter Paul Cardone.
I got a tape off them, which was great. I remember myself and my friends at some point driving around and actually taking time, trying to make our journey longer so we could keep playing this tape. And then they got an agent, I spoke to the agent, they played with, if I remember correctly, I think they supported St Etienne and brought what felt like coachloads of people from Manchester with them, because I went to the dressing room afterwards and it was just full of people all claiming to be in the band and demanding to get paid.
Never mind, I'll find a new route. Stay round.
And then immediately after that we did some more shows. They played a small gig in Edinburgh where there was actually no dressing room and we were allowed to put bits of like newspaper over paint cans as seats in a cupboard that we turned into a dressing room for the night. And it quite quickly, from there, the shows just immediately grew in size and height.
They are the best reason to believe in rock and roll in 1994. Oasis!
Was the signing when they signed to Sony, which was a day of absolute carnage in Soho Square. They trashed half the office, as I recall. Yeah, they were putting these weird things in, like when it came to actually signing the contract, there was a picture of the band, The Farm, on the wall. They insisted it be written into the contract that the picture of the farm had to be turned around to face the wall, because Noel didn't think that they were worthy, the farm, of being witnessing this epochal event that they were signing. So they went along to this place, the Falcon in North London, this pub. Liam decided that they should play a gig to celebrate signing, but Noel was having none of it. There was a band called Whiteout that were playing, so they had all their equipment there, and Liam just got up on stage and started playing. So that just ended up with yet another row between Liam and Noel. I think Noel stormed off. And this is like within 6 hours of them signing. So it was kind of pretty obvious how things were going to go from then on.
You know, the first song that Alan played me was Bring It On Down.
Exit left.
He handed me this cassette box that had a Union Jack going down the plug hole on it. I thought, that's a really interesting image. That was quite an angry and raw and political record and seemed to really fit with the imagery on the cassette. And it would have been a brilliant statement of intent, except Noel went and wrote an even better record in Supersonic.
Thank you, this is the last one. It's going to be the single.
Exit down.
There was this confidence just flooding through them. They were quite convinced they were going to be the biggest band in the world.
On the 11th of April 1994, the band released their first single, Supersonic. Steve Lamacq was one of the two presenters of the hugely influential BBC Radio 1 evening session show.
I suppose you have to put it into context, really. Oasis were always going to happen, would have happened eventually, but everything fell into place for them. I think there was a real hunger, real appetite to reclaim the sort of younger music of the clubs and indie rock bands. And Radio 1 at this point were desperate for indie rock bands. I mean, really were such a thirst for this sort of music. The scene was set for them, really.
This is Listen Up, the people's story of Definitely Maybe.
And then exit left.
The Oasis podcast. After several
Exit left.
successful British gigs, a plan was hatched to introduce the band to mainland Europe. Johnny Hopkins.
One of the things you do as a PR person is commission photographs. You know, you're not only there to get press coverage, but you're also thinking about the visuals and everything. So you pick photographers, you pick locations. They had this gig supporting the Verve in Amsterdam. You know, brilliant
Turn
opportunity to play to a foreign audience, to support the Verve, who in 1994 were really hot. I thought, great, I'll take a photographer over there to take pictures of them in Amsterdam, get a sense that this is an international band with international ambition and everything.
Journalist Hamish McBain.
So, you know, from an industry point of view, quite an important show. They met up in Manchester and they got in the van, as they would do in those early days. And Guigsy, the bass player, had just been made redundant by British Gas. So he'd been given his redundancy in cash, and he'd been given kind of 2,000-3,000 quid in 50 pound notes. They're going away for what would have been one of their first ever foreign trips as a band. And they've got $3,000 in cash burning a hole in the bass player's pocket. And as anyone who knows, when you get on those ferries, anyone who's ever been on one of those ferries, you drive on and then you get up, and there isn't a great deal to do apart from drink.
They got into some kind of banter, I think Bonehead described it as, with some other lads on the ferry, and these lads came in and stole Bonehead's clothes. So he woke up, found out he didn't have any clothes, so he was running up and down the corridor trying to find these people and got arrested, surprisingly enough. And then other people started popping out from the band, like Liam, to see what was going on, and they got arrested.
This is all without Noel, by the way. Noel was in his cabin being sensible and getting some sleep before the show.
Without news reaching the office in time, Johnny Hopkins and the photographer flew to Amsterdam to meet with the band in a downtown guest house.
It was pretty grotty. There wasn't like a reception area. There was just like a little short telephone table in the hallway, and a woman sat at it. These are our names. We're checking in. We're with a group of people called Oasis, and we've come to meet up with them. She said, okay. You know, alarm bells starting to ring here a little bit. She put me through on the phone up to the room. All right, Johnny, you'd better come up straight away, like on your own. And I'm going, oh fuck, what's happened, right? I went upstairs, big room with bunk beds for about 10 people, and there's only 2 people in the room, and it's Noel and Mark Coyle, the sound engineer. And he said, look, sit down. And I go, oh, all right, okay. Right, you know, where are the others? And he said, sit down and I'll tell you. On the one hand, it's a great rock and roll story, but on the other hand, the job hasn't been done. We've got to salvage something from this. Of course, fortunately, the photographer that I took with me was the staff photographer for the NME. So I knew that he could take that photograph back and a story back. You know, with any luck, we'll get a prominent story in the NME. But I had to persuade Noel to have his picture taken. But eventually he agreed to have a photo taken in front of a poster from the gig. And the poster was on a lamppost on one of the typical kind of little bridges over canals in Amsterdam. So it sort of communicated that international thing that I was trying to get at. Gave the whole story to the NME. And not only was it like a little story, it was the lead news story of that particular week, and that elevated the band up a whole sort of different step on the ladder. But if we hadn't had the photo, that story would have been buried. You always need a story and you need a picture, and we got both.
Yeah, that's the first time they really got in the tabloid. Obviously NME and people covered it.
Dominic Mohan.
The beauty for me was I was a massive fan of this kind of music, and then I was becoming a showbiz music journalist, and the stars were kind of aligning that there was this movement. And I remember hearing Alan McGee talk about it and saying, it's fantastic that you've been arrested. You know, he knew that that was a real moment where they could potentially cross over into the mainstream media and out of the pages of the music press.
Paul Mather.
Noel, I think that it really annoyed him what had happened. I think when he went back, he was going, look, we're going to take this seriously, we're not going to just dick around. That they had to keep at the forefront of their minds that they weren't just going to throw all this away. There was plenty of time after they split up eventually for them to just throw it away. But at the time, they had to keep the focus on actually succeeding. But in a way, because they were having these kind of escapades, which no one else had really been doing for quite some time, certainly not since the old punk days, would you get stories in broadsheets about badly behaved musicians. So that kind of made them even more newsworthy, I suppose.
Which is true, but the fact is always, that's great, but there has to be great music to follow that up, and there was.
Join us next week for part 2 of Listen Up, the people's story of Definitely Maybe. We'll hear tales from the recording studio.
They were just like a whole bunch of kids for a school trip.
Relive that moment they were first spotted on TV.
I remember the performance on The Word, and that was kind of, who are these guys?
Plus, that first taste of the colossal success that would follow.
In his hallway, there was a clothes rail with a load of his shirts that had all been ironed, with plastic bags over, on wire hangers, that he'd sent to a laundry. I thought, that's it, he's made it. He has his shirts done at a laundry.
Thank you for listening. And don't forget, the remastered version of Definitely Maybe is available on all services to stream and download now. This was a Cup and Nuzzle production